But the senator, while indoctrinated, could not explain his toxicity.
You should not listen to men's rights advocates if you want to know what they have to say.
二人いつきあ、二人目よく出ながら録画してくれておーのそれにあのレベルLet's begin. Indeed.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Honey Badger Radio. My name is Brian, and this is the Fireside Chat. I am here with actress and filmmaker Naama Kates. Hello, Naama. How are you doing?
Good.
Good. The reason why I have Naama Kates on is actually it was actually kind of a spontaneous decision on my part, where I came across a podcast that she had put out a trailer for called Incel, or I guess the Incel Project is how I kind of know it, but it's actually just called Incel, where she talks about going down, you could say, the proverbial rabbit hole of the Incel community. So I thought I just got to talk to this person. There's a lot of talk about incels going around. The BBC just released a documentary not long ago, and one of the people who actually support our channel was interviewed, although his interview did not make it into the final cut. And so even though what Honey Badger Radio focuses on technically usually revolves around the more political and legal aspects of the issues facing men and boys, we recognize that the cultural aspects, the cultural issues that men and boys face are actually they're the substrate of all of these greater issues. So we want to talk to people who are talking about these things, and we try to do so in a just a really frank and honest and compassionate way. So Naama, once again, thank you for coming on.
Thank you for having me. I'm looking at the chats on the side there. Just some interesting thoughts.
Yes, our chat is it's a mixed bag of extremely blunt to trolly. So sometimes they're gonna mess with you to see to sort of test your resolve. And there are some incels that watch us as well, especially since I actually had on the guy who runs the incel forums at incels.co. And yeah, go ahead.
I've spoken to him. Yeah, I've spoken to him quite a bit.
Yeah, I noticed that he actually made some tweets that where he stood up for you, right? I believe so. Yeah. So let me ask you a question, Naama. Why did you become interested in this subject?
Well, I don't know. It's kind of not a direct line story, but I remember hearing about it and hearing the term and things like that. Sort of the merger of technology and society is always interesting to me, and people's identities online. So I became interested in it, just kind of peripherally. And about a year ago, someone messaged me on Twitter, like a random direct message. And I had just started using Twitter again. I'd taken off for a while. And, I didn't know what the context of the message was or why they wanted to talk to me, but we began talking. And I realized pretty early on that he is an incel. And the talks just kind of went from there. And yeah.
How did you know? Did he just tell you explicitly, or did you get some other sense?
Well, actually, I wanted to make sure, I wanted to ask him if he was kind of reaching out to me as a romantic thing, because people do, if it's, male, female on Twitter with strangers, usually it's either something maybe work related, or it's kind of a romantic, somebody's trying to get to know you in that way. And I asked, and he was so offended and like indignant that I had asked that's when I began to wonder if that was the case. And I asked him, and then he did tell me.
Ah, I see. So, so what kind of work? Because this is okay. Let me just back up a little bit. This project you're working on, you've done other things before, or is this like your first time doing like a podcast on a topic?
This is my first time doing a podcast and a podcast on a theme like this, certainly.
Oh, and so not only just like because you just met this person, found out they were incel, then you started having all these conversations, and like how did you come to this? Like, oh, I really want to talk about this in this subject in a public way with a podcast. Like, how did you cross that gorge to make that sort of conclusion?
I think, well, I had just discovered podcasts basically at the time, and I'm, a filmmaker. I've made films and I've made music and things like that. And I was really falling in love with that medium because I'm an auditory oriented person. I like that podcasts they're not all tied up in money and lowest common denominator. People go really deep with them, and there's something really intimate about them. So I was just really getting into podcasts in general, and the calls. I started recording the calls after a while, and I would listen back to them, and I thought this is really interesting. It's really engaging for me, at least. I find it compelling, and so it just kind of seemed like a good medium to explore that. And yeah, I don't know. It was a seed of an idea, and it kind of went from there.
Yeah, and well, without giving too much away, did you have any presuppositions or sort of ideas that you had gone into this with an expectation, and then maybe like that had changed in some way, like by the time everything was over? Like how did you sort of, did anything shift from when you started this journey to where you are now?
Everything shifted for me. I mean, I did have presuppositions, certainly.
Mm-hmm.
I was never in the camp of like, these people don't deserve any sympathy and they're evil, and I don't really think that way about people. But I definitely had my preconceived notions because of what I had been exposed to in media, that there was a lot, it was just misogynistic, and it was people that were kind of just whining about meaningless things. Very quickly my mind was changed about that, and I felt terrible for thinking it, and for thinking that I might want to explore this in kind of like a gawky, just as a novelty, because these are real people, and a lot of them are very bright and very interesting. It's people that are incels find themselves in a sad situation. It's not a happy situation for the most part. And I felt that very quickly, and it led me to change my mind about quite a number of things, actually, when I started really looking at that.
Oh, okay. So you actually, you came to a good conclusion, and I think part of it has to do with the fact that you did approach this discussion in a really honest way. You wanted to talk to them. You wanted to find out what they, what life is like for them. It was, it seemed to me anyway, that it's coming from a place of genuine curiosity, that later may have turned into empathy. Would that be fair?
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And so after you did that, I saw that you had shared on the Incel Project Twitter page that you were going to be, going into this, and you put down like a 7-minute trailer, which I listened to a couple of times. And because the first time I listened to it, I was like, I wonder where she's coming from. I was wondering if this was going to be, critical of them, or if this was going to be sort of like, unbiased, or, whatever. And I think the first time, I was a bit wary, because I mean, in general, there's just so many hit pieces, and they're actually getting a lot. Yeah, they're actually getting a lot subtler. So they're putting in sprinklings of things that you think, oh, this is in good faith, but then there's still like the prevailing narrative is overall negative.
Yes, it's also very superficial. I'm really shocked that at this point, 2019, all of these reputable outlets and places like the BBC that have resources I could only dream of would do such shallow surface. I mean, it's like, why did you bother doing any research at all? Basically, it's clips that they found from the news, and it doesn't really go into any kind of depth. I don't understand why journalists are continuing to do that at this point. It's just strange to me, and it still is. I mean, I definitely thought that once this was out, once I started working on it, there would have been more kind of just not even positive or neutral, but just a little bit more in-depth coverage about the issue.
Yeah, more interest in sort of getting to some truth, as opposed to simply, because what they do is they usually, in the last one, which has been the most fair one the BBC has done yet, which is still, that's not saying much. So, but they spoke to multiple men that, we can only assume are incels, either because they're in the community or they just identify that way. Yeah, because the one guy, I talked to him on Friday, his name is Richard, and he's actually someone who spends a lot of time in our Discord. And I talked to him all the time. I met him in person at the ICMI last year. And, he's just a sweet guy. He's just completely docile. And, I don't want to, just like a really sweet kid, he's young. But he doesn't go on the forums. He doesn't, talk on there. He said he was banned from incels.co because I don't really know why, but they're pretty quick to ban there for various reasons.
Right. Understandably, in a lot of ways, I get why they do that. Because they've been targeted. I mean, the incels Reddit was banned. The incels.is or incels.me was pulled. Now that the subreddit is quarantined, brain cells, and the wiki entries that they write keep getting delisted from Google search results. And so, they're quick to be sort of censored and deplatformed.
Absolutely. It's actually had a bit of a domino effect. So I don't know because you've done these interviews with incels. So I don't know if this put you on the path to going down the sort of manosphere rabbit hole, which is like part of the incel is not exactly it's not exactly a movement. I mean, I know that it gets treated like one, but it's not, right? It's because, it's the only movement that exists that no one wants to be a member of. But but one of the side effects of this incel banning that happened on Reddit was that a lot of the incels ended up going into the MGTOW forums and the MGTOW Reddits, and the men going their own way. They're not
red pill.
Yeah, well, it's a bit of a there's a bit of a puzzle there. There's a lot of pieces to it. Like there's the men's rights activists, there's the red pill community, there's the pickup artist community, and then there's the MGTOW community. And those are there's probably a bunch of subcultures as well.
Yeah.
But the men going their own way are basically they're only similar to incels insofar as many of them are celibate, but really they are just trying to, or they are walking away from what they believe is a bad deal culturally. So they're just not participating. And the incels actually believe that men are going their own way are just incels that don't know it yet or don't want to, they don't want to accept that. So this banning actually caused the other subcommunities to clash with each other. Although, I think that all of this stuff they're all symptoms of a much bigger problem. The incel thing, the MGTOW thing, the pickup artists, the red pillars, they're all men even going beyond that, even people in Antifa and people in that are Islamic extremists and people like these men in the alt-right, it's all this is all symptomatic of
100%.
a larger issue. Oh, good. What do you think? I'd like to hear that.
Well, without getting too finger pointy or to align myself too much with one thing or another, I could say that just, long story short, there is something going on in our society that is not quite working. And maybe I think a lot of it has to do with technology and technological innovations that we as a species just we can't keep up with the pace that things are changing. So that's part of it. And then, identity politics has become a very huge and pervasive thing, especially with younger people. And sort of the demonizing of anything male or masculinity is, it's problematic. And I think that men and women are at odds with each other. I think that the effect that it's having on young women is, that exists too. They experience it differently. But also with social media and with sort of the Instagramization of everything, where people are kind of constantly living for this image, a two-dimensional little image of themselves, and actually more disconnected from each other than they used to be. I think that it's taking a strange toll on men and women and on sort of the order of things, where women, because they're women and young women especially, can get a lot of very superficial, shallow attention by posting photographs. And then with online dating, men they sort of get the opposite, really. And it's just, and then there's also, of course, the issue about feminism, and a lot of these movements are sort of Marxist-ish.
Oh, yeah.
Political.
No. That's absolutely right. It really is. It's actually using gender in place of class to create a kind of class struggle, which is actually far more effective than using class. Because
it's gender and race as well. I mean,
yeah, race as well. But I think that with gender, it's the most effective. Even if
it's the most universal, because that can be anywhere, and that could be everyone has a gender.
Yeah,
well,
and
not according to some people, but yeah.
No, yeah, that's true. No, the thing is that to that point, yes, they use other forms of let's say the oppressor narratives in the form of gender and race and sexuality and religious status and nationality. But those are all just substitutes for class, because when they try to do it with class, it didn't work. And so they're just trying to usher it in another way. And I think that the reason why I say the gender thing is it's going to always be the ultimate decider. So if you break everything down, we can, and I'll just give you a brief example of what I mean. Let's look at Black Lives Matter. So Black Lives Matter plays the identity politics oppressor class struggle by putting black people as the oppressed and whites as the oppressors, and so white supremacy is the problem. But within that, because Black Lives Matter is actually run and operated by radical feminists, they also believe that black men within the black community oppress black women. So the gender dichotomy still dominates, even though black men's deaths are what started Black Lives Matter. But they still put black men as the oppressor. And so that's like, no matter what happens, as long as you're playing that game of oppressor, oppressed, perpetuator, and victim, you will always have women as the victims and men as the oppressors. If you eliminate all other factors, that will always remain, because, as you said, in all over the world, in every culture, in every ethnicity, in every nation, there are men and there are women.
There are men and women.
Yes.
Right. And
Yes.
if that ever is no longer the case, then there goes the human species, right?
Yes. Yes.
You know, yeah.
Wait.
I mean, the whole oppressor and oppressed narrative it's very reductive. You know, it really reduces. Well, first of all, it reduces everything to society and societal problems, and
Mhm.
really also to economics. And that's not the whole of the picture. Like solving, you know, going back to Marxism, the whole idea was that these oppressors are pressing you, all of you, and that's affecting you financially. And if that is solved, then it will be utopia. But that's not the only dimension of a human life is power. It's not all power, and it's not all money either. So it's very reductive in that it takes all the problems of our society and kind of, you know, boils it down to this. And in that way, I think it's also it's very easy, you know, it's very easy to kind of see things that way. And it's
Mhm.
very seductive to kind of play that game. And so people are buying into it in droves. I mean, like, you know, I was one of them, never to that extent, but I certainly didn't see social justice I didn't see social justice warrior as an insult or anything. And I kind of, you know, thought that the people that were fighting that fight were on the right side. And a lot of them probably are coming from the right place. They're not, I don't think that they're bad intentioned or even stupid or anything like that. But
Mhm.
it's just, it feels like an altruistic, noble cause and like a brave cause. And it's really, it's not going to solve any of these problems. And in fact, I don't know, freedom of speech is an
Yeah.
issue now, as you know. As I
Absolutely.
know, I mean, I've been on the wrong side of a Twitter mob. And with this project, even with this, before the first episode is even out, you know, there's a trailer and I get all kinds of attack messages.
That's
And
yeah. I was gonna come to that. I wanted to know a
yeah,
little bit about the response. Yeah. You know what? Why don't you tell me a little bit about the response, and then I'm gonna have some questions about your life before this project started. So what kind of response did you get from your trailer on Twitter? Is it that the main place where you advertise it? And yeah, what
yeah.
happened?
Well, for the most part, the response has been really good. You know, I'm going through a network that's Crawl Space Media that's putting it out, and their shows are mostly like true crime and mystery and stuff like that. The audience is pretty, I think, seems pretty open-minded and very interested, and I got a lot of really positive feedback. I got some feedback that was, it wasn't positive. It was, you know, I'm not going to listen to this because I know that, you know, some were even criticisms of the network saying like, you know, you focus on so many stories about violence against women, like how can you greenlight this sort of sympathy piece, you know,
I
for
saw
men
that.
who, yeah. But that person was reasonable and respectful, and as soon as, you know, we kind of talked back and forth, they said, all right, I'm willing to hear what this is like. So there's been some of that, but then there's also been just, you know, people that are on a crusade and on a mission and just were kind of, they would screenshot it, just a little pitch for the trailer, a little, you know, plug for it, and just over and over again put this like, how can you, you know, oh my god, I can't believe you're doing this, like, you know, Crawl Space, you shouldn't air this, you shouldn't approve this, these
Hmm.
people are horrible, they're all terrorists. And at first I thought that person might have been reasonable too.
Yeah.
And I responded back the way that I did with other people, trying to say, you know, if you're actually worried about the problems of violence or whatever, then maybe understanding it more is a way to kind of address that. I think it's important, and they just weren't having it. And they said anything but, you know, talks about the good of incels is bad. And this person was supposed to be a journalist too, mind you.
Yeah.
Like in their bio, they have, you know, links to their previous work. So
Hmm.
pretty mainstream, reputable outlets too.
Oh yeah, well
Mm.
that seems par for the course.
Yeah.
What do you think that their goals were? Was it just wow, or were they did you think that they wanted you to just not do it, or do they want you to use that platform to demonize them or shame them off the internet, or do they just want to shut you down, or what?
I think that that they did want to shut it down. I do think that that was their goal, um, in a sense. But I think that really beyond that, and probably more accurately and more truthfully, is that they just wanted attention for themselves. That they're this
Mm,
fighter for whatever, that they are fighting for, justice, and they just wanted to be seen as kind of the white knight, which is
as
funny because that's
virtuous
a term.
and yeah.
Yeah, that's a term that incels use for what your audience might know, white knights, um, who are like the defenders of feminists and stuff. So they were maybe, I think, trying to act as that and get some attention for themselves. Honestly, I
Yeah.
think that's really what it came
Yeah.
down to.
So, what did you do, or what did you believe before you started on this path? Well, actually, better yet, you and I were talking a little bit before the stream started, and I was explaining that I had a philosophical and political paradigm shift a couple of years back when
Mm-hmm.
I was getting involved with this men's issues topic, and you nodded knowingly, like you knew what that felt like. So I assume that you also had a shift. So why don't you tell me a little bit about um, the kind of person you were, and then like what changed you, and how much it's changed you, if you don't mind.
um, I don't mind. I'm going to sort of preface it by saying that I don't want to paint myself into a political uh,
Label.
corner
I can understand
label.
that. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, especially because there are people who are probably on the fence about this particularly subject, the show, about incels. And I would say maybe a lot of them tend to lean a certain way politically. I don't want to. I don't want them to sort of shut down and not give it a chance and not even get to know the people and the stories right out of the gate. So that's a large reason why I don't want to do that. I'm not trying to make a political show. Really, I'm more interested
Yeah.
in.
I wouldn't think that talking about inceldom should be political.
No,
No,
yeah,
I wouldn't think that it should be.
right, exactly. So that's why I don't want to sort of, immediately pigeonhole myself or the show that way. But I'll say this much, which is that, like I said, I have usually been kind of not apolitical. I was always interested in politics and what was going on, in a way where I'm interested. I was always pretty moderate though. But the past 2.5, 3 years, with the climate getting as heated as it has, and some of the insanity, I was sucked in. I would say a little bit at first.
Mm-hmm.
After the election, after Trump won the election, um, and kind of getting caught up in the ideas that this was that the Republicans now were not really the Republicans as they used to be, and this was like this new form of whatever, and that he was using dog whistles to kind of, I'm going to get myself in a lot of trouble even just saying this, but
Yeah.
like to say racist things and stuff like that, and
Yeah.
I kind of took that at face value, I guess, in reading it, and um, and then I was listening too. I was listening to politically oriented podcasts, more on the leftist side of things. And at some point, I just became very turned off by that and by those. I wasn't sure exactly why, but it began to smell to me of propaganda in a way.
Mm-hmm.
It just seemed a little hysterical. My background is Russian, and we are familiar with what propaganda looks like, and it was all looking like that. I was feeling that way about both sides of the aisle. But at one point, the Covington incident was one of them, and if you remember the Covington High School,
of course, yeah,
that one, and a few other things started happening that I was like, wow, this is getting crazy. And I realized that when I would go in and start to discuss things or say things in some of my favorite social media haunts, or even like say the Washington Post kind of comments section, people were very unwilling to hear anything at all, other than and with that story, in my opinion, the Covington story, to me, it seemed very obvious that those kids were not at fault there. They were actually handling it quite well, in my opinion. And I get why people at first blush, because the way it was presented would think otherwise. But the fact that, supposedly intelligent, diligent people that want the facts were really unwilling to hear them at all it was kind of surprising to me that it had gotten that bad. And so I sort of distanced myself from all of that. And then as I started and was beginning to find the other side a bit more, at least more open-minded, more open-minded to diversity of thought, diversity of opinion.
Yeah. You and I talked a little bit on Twitter, and you mentioned that you found that this idea that there's this like and this doesn't necessarily, again, it doesn't have to necessarily be political. I actually think that in some ways it isn't, but it just really looks that way. But there are people on the basically what you have is there are people on the left, and they don't want to talk to anyone because they're 100% sure of what they believe, and so they don't have to talk to anybody unless they want to dunk on them politically and just virtue signal to their friends and look good. And they live in a bubble, right, where it's just a bunch of people who agree with them, and the mainstream media, they essentially echo all those sentiments, which validates what they already believe. And then there's not the right. I mean, not just the right. There's just everybody else. There's just moderates and center leftists and liberals and conservatives and right wingers and libertarians and anarcho-capitalists and so on, and they're all talking to each other. Everybody else.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's ironic because there's this label alt-right. That the left has sort of come up with, and the way they see it, it's that everybody who's not on the left is alt-right, and alt-right is this pejorative, right? Like, if you are alt-right, you are a troll, you are a Nazi, racist, misogynist, homophobe, whatever you are. And that's the way they sort of paint that group. But the truth is, and this was a long time ago, I began to find the fact that everybody was just calling everyone a racist was a little bit, if you're actually concerned about racial issues, to call someone a racist because they are pro-life, or because they not only are pro-life, but defend the right of someone who is pro-life to have an opinion, then you're a racist. Like, it doesn't make sense. And so it's really the left that has become this way. The left has gone, so it's far left, very, very, very far left, and all about kind of identity politics, to the point where, and this sort of neo-Marxism, that anyone that deviates from that at all is now considered the alt-right. So, here we are.
Yeah. So you're absolutely right on all counts. That is pretty much where we are. I mean, there's more layers to it that I could certainly get into, because I talk about this a lot, but this is I guess this show is mainly a men's issues show. Like, our channel is about men's rights. I think those are the more, I think they're more critical subjects of our time, because if we just talk about the problems within any, people wherever they are in the political spectrum, the divide between men and women, that issue is, in my opinion, the most important issue.
Yeah. And always has been.
Yeah, and there definitely is a split there. And I think it's because the people who are having the conversation, the mainstream voices on gender, are people who actually they don't seem to want men and women to get along. They want to create a relationship that isn't complementary between the sexes, but is rather about a power
Contentious.
struggle.
Yeah.
Yes, you got it. It's a power struggle. And that's just not true. Like, you've seen the Gillette ad, right? The best a man can get. Do you remember that?
Yeah, of course I do.
Yeah, about toxic.
You mean the one where, yes, about toxic masculinity or whatever?
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah.
And there was another ad that I just saw last night. It's actually for Lee Jeans. And it features a woman in Lee Jeans getting on a train, and she sits next to a man. And across from her, there's an older woman that acknowledges her because the sisterhood, apparently, all women know each other and they get along. And this man, no, this really happens. This is the weirdest commercial. The man on the train sitting next to this young woman in the Lee Jeans, he starts manspreading. And he does it in this really over-the-top way that no man ever does, right? And so what she does is she puts her leg on top of his, so she woman spreads, like she overdoes it. And then of course that makes him like shrink up, and then the older woman gives a knowing like fist pump kind of, yeah, you get him, girl, you know. And I'm watching this. It's this, I'll have to send it to you. This guy that Peter Lloyd shared it out. He's the suffragette. He's actually a British guy that talks a lot about men's issues, and yeah, so Lee Jeans is basically on my boycott list right next to Procter and Gamble. But this prevailing narrative, it's been, especially in the entertainment industry, and now it's going into corporate advertising, it's in film, it's in music, it's in
the superhero movies and the Disney movies and all that.
Yeah, you got it. It's the casting and everything. It's if it's not woke, then it shouldn't be made. And especially when it comes to the way it treats men, and by extension it treats women. Because it's actually, there's some harmful stuff in there for women as well.
Very harmful stuff. Yes.
Yeah. So
I mean, it's harmful for women, period, to not have any kind of respect for how men are different than them. That's harmful already. It's also harmful for them to think that that something like maybe motherhood, or maybe not being like the leader of the free world, is an acceptable goal, in my opinion.
Yeah. Or in a more fundamental way. So the narrative goes that everything a woman wants should simply be given to her, and all of this comes without any responsibilities, which means it doesn't have any meaning. And so you just have women that are essentially being treated like children, and they
infantilized completely.
Yes, they're absolutely infantilized, and they grow up. If this, if this sort of like was to affect them, they would grow up in a world where in their mind they can do whatever they want without consequences, but there's no responsibility put on them. So that actually depresses them over time, because they find that nothing they do matters, because they'll get acceptance no matter what. And then you get girls that are selling their bathwater online.
Yes, exactly. I just saw a tweet from one the other day about gamer girl pee is apparently all the rage.
That's actually that turned out to just be a prank, a troll. It wasn't real. The girl in question, Belle Delphine, she's got like the pink hair. She's actually disappeared from the internet because they banned her from several platforms, and I don't agree with that. I think that was that I wouldn't go that far. I think that she should be
banning in general.
Yeah. I don't agree with that in general. However, it turned out that the Belle Delphine thing, she was selling her bathwater as a prank, but no one ever got it. As far as I know, it's hard to tell whether or not any of that is actually true. Then someone made a parody account of hers that was selling gamer girl pee. but it wasn't her, and it wasn't actually for sale. So there's a lot of misinformation going around. But
Sure.
as far as I know, Belle Delphine's orders haven't even left yet, but she disappeared from the internet, so we don't really know the truth.
Right. If it's trolling, good for them for trolling
yeah,
in that way.
Well done. But what were we gonna say?
Well, you reminded me just about, there was actually one of the first interviews I had with one of the incels who I reached out to. I think I saw his posts on incels.co. And he's very eloquent, and a lot of them really are, and are really interesting and really smart and funny, and they make just great subjects. It writes the show for itself. But his first kind of communication to me was this long, extremely well written email. It was 6,000 words, and it had me crying by the end of it. But he pointed out that that the double standard, but part of it is just in the way that women have body positivity campaigns like Dove, Dove all sizes things, and then and men have nothing like that. And he called it the errant men are trash tweet, or I don't need a man tweet, or whatever. And just how that constantly being said and pervade is giving people, I mean, that it's okay for women to not just be critical of men, but to completely say that they're trash, and they're we don't need them. What are they good for? Nothing. Things like all they're good for is this and that. And if a man said anything, or also disparaging their appearance, like height and looks, and I need it to be this and that. And if men say anything critical of women, then they are just ostracized completely.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And it's if you're going to be the empathic liberal, the compassionate liberal who wants to be sensitive to everybody, and if you talk about sexism and ableism, and there's so many things we can't say because we need to be sensitive to these people's plight, then I just find it strange that they feel it's okay to be cool and completely dehumanizing to a whole group of people that, is not denying that they're going through difficult things, and some of them have mental health issues. Well, whatever the case, they feel very isolated and very rejected by society. And why is it okay to just be taunting them and just laughingly dismissing them? It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, absolutely. We definitely have different standards for that, and the incels are correct to point that out. We've talked about it. And it's not, when it comes to the body positivity movement, it's not just the really big women like Tess Holliday that are celebrated for existing. It's also there's women like models, professional models that are paid lots of money, like Stefania Ferrario, or there was a woman whose name I can't remember, but she pulled this political stunt where she got on a train and she took her clothes off to make a statement about body positivity, but she wasn't fat at all.
Right.
I was looking at this and she's saying all bodies are beautiful, blah blah blah, and I was like, yeah, but most men like that. I don't understand what point you're trying to make.
Right.
And it's actually beyond that. And also it's worth pointing out that I wouldn't believe that most people would want this body positivity message to extend to men, because I don't think we want to promote unhealthy living, but that doesn't mean that we want to shame people just on the basis of their weight. I think that it's it should come from a place of concern. I think that what's happening with that is sort of in line with how we treat women, how feminism treats women, which is essentially to say that there's nothing wrong with you as you are, and you're a perfect being, and you can do no wrong, and you're morally virtuous, and you deserve everything, and you should never be unhappy. And I think that that's and that means this comes with no responsibility. So no matter how you act, no matter how irresponsible you are, it's irrelevant because it's not your fault because patriarchy. And so they do the same thing. It's true. And they do the same thing with the weight thing, with the body positive movement, where they're saying eat whatever you want, you know, it doesn't matter. And the fact is, in both cases, nature disagrees and it's going to catch up with you. So I think, yeah, absolutely.
I mean, when I started this, or, you know, when people started I started promoting it, or people were aware that I was doing it, I got loads of messages from, you know, well-meaning people warning me not to either become indoctrinated or something, which is ironic. Who's indoctrinated? But also not to let these men use me for their agenda. I was accused of helping them recruit people. And then I was also told that if I felt any kind of sympathy, or if I agreed with anything that they were saying, then it must be because, you know, some man, there's some powerful man that I want to align myself with. Like, basically the patriarchy made me do it. Mm-hmm. And it's just like, you know, how sexist is that? I can't have my own thoughts. It must be that I was, you know, manipulated by some man. Like, that's the irony, is I feel like a lot of these people that are so social justice oriented are actually practicing discrimination themselves.
Oh, absolutely.
With a lot of these ideas.
It's a very, very powerful and appealing narrative.
Exactly.
To be able to go along with the idea that nothing that's bad in your life is your fault, or that the reason why you don't have everything that you've dreamed of is because of something that you can't see or touch or taste or smell or hear, called the patriarchy, is keeping you from getting it. It's a very appealing thing, and I think that it works well. And when you have, you know, academics that, you know, people are supposed to respect and they're supposed to see as experts, and they're all saying, yes, it is the patriarchy, it's actually, it comes across as cultish religious thinking. That's actually more insidious than, you know, like some of the actual, like, dangerous religious thinking that we've seen. But it's not.
Well, it's very similar. It's very similar to it. The other way that it's similar is that, you know, we live in a relatively good society, a good part of the world where people do have a lot of things. Their ontological needs are sort of met, you know, and there might be some sort of sense of meaninglessness for a lot of people as a result of that. They don't know how to make their lives meaningful or find value in them. And this is giving them a call to arms, kind of like, this is a righteous, noble thing to do, fighting the patriarchy, smashing the patriarchy. You know, if you're doing that, then you're doing something meaningful and important. And it's this false sense of purpose, you know, in the place of religious purpose.
That's correct. You got it. Hey, here's a question I thought I would ask. It doesn't matter how you answer, because I take any guest. I've had people, you know, all kinds of people on. But have you ever seen the movie The Red Pill?
No.
Do you know about it?
Maybe, I'm not sure. I've heard that term so much recently that I could be, what is it?
Okay, The Red Pill is a documentary by a woman. It's actually, her story sounds a lot like yours. She is an actress, and she went to Hollywood to chase her dream, and she played in a lot of very small films, mostly like slasher movies, where she played the girl who dies. And her name is Cassie Jaye. And she became a feminist in Hollywood, around that environment, that culture, and a pretty staunch one at that. And she became a documentary filmmaker, and she made a film about I can't remember the name of the film. I think it's called Daddy I Do, which is about arranged marriages in certain sort of like, really religious parts of the country. And she made another film about marriage equality, which is essentially about, gay marriage and so on. And then she decided she was going to make a film about the men's movement. And the reason why was originally she was going to make a film about rape culture. This is like how far down the feminist sort of hole she was. And in her research, she came across a parody article written by Paul Elam, who is a prominent figure in the men's movement. And it was essentially a parody of a feminist article from a website called Jezebel. And he took the article from Jezebel and reversed the genders and just put it out. And it was like this thing that gets cited over and over and over to show how much Paul Elam hates women. And these people don't realize that all he did was swap the genders in a Jezebel article that was written by radical feminists. And so Cassie Jaye was intrigued by this guy and decided, I'm going to make a documentary about the men's rights movement and exposed how sexist and misogynist they are. And as she went through the process, she slowly began to shift her beliefs and started to realize that the MRM actually had a lot of really great points to talk about. And there's a lot of really great material. And so by the end of the film, she actually declared that she no longer identified as a feminist. Now, she still believes in gender equality, whatever that means, but like a kind of gender fairness in the legal sense, but she doesn't take on the label of feminist anymore because she doesn't think that it is encompassing enough. So I guess my first question was if you had seen that movie, and if not, I'll send you the links. You can watch it on Amazon Prime for free right now. It's available all over, and it's really good. I highly recommend it. It'll give you an idea of what we're about and what we do. So, and the other thing is that I wanted to know if you identify as a feminist.
Again, with what that means now, today, it's hard for me to say that I identify that way. With the sort of classical definition of it, which is that women should get equality of opportunity, not equality of outcome, but equality of opportunity. Sure. I also think that feminism is something that is incredibly important in other parts of the world. In other countries, there are countries where women are literally oppressed, where they can't leave the house, without a man, where they are mutilated and things like that. And just for even purely economic reasons, that doesn't work. Countries without any kind of gender equality, where women don't have the ability to make choices or to earn income, just in a purely economic sense, that's not good for the society. You cut your population of workers and earners in half. So, obviously I believe in a basic amount of gender equality. Now, gender equity is a different thing. And there's not, I don't have any issues with women at all. In fact, I'm all for it. Individuals are different. I'm not so fixated on my gender, that I think it's the most important characteristic about someone. I think that individuals vary. There are some women that are incredibly, that have more, typically or traditionally masculine qualities, and they go into male-dominated fields and can do very well. And I think that those people should, of course, be given those options and those opportunities. I don't think there's any need to arbitrarily say that anyone, whatever sex they are, can't do something or shouldn't do something. I just think that ignoring the inherent biological differences between men and women, which are many, and which also manifest in a lot of ways in personality differences, it's silly. I just think it's silly to do that.
I think that it's one of the things about asking that question is that the label itself is ultimately not that important if you're a person that just cares about whether or not these issues are important to you. So if you're just like, I think that the genders should be treated fairly, and that they should have the opportunity to chase whatever dreams they want,
Right.
and that we shouldn't get in the way. These kinds of things are straightforward common sense beliefs.
Common sense things.
Yeah. And they don't I think that the word feminist has so much baggage attached to it that when you ask someone whether or not they are a feminist, if they are, they'll just say it right out. But I think that people who believe in
it might even add radical to it.
Yeah. They might. We've certainly spoken to radical feminists, but that's because they're proud of the label. But the people who they care about the issues, they are usually, they have a harder time embracing it because they're like, well, I like these good things, but I don't like these bad things over here. And I think that these good things could go with this label, but I don't think they have to stand with it. And this is one of the reasons why I never ask anyone, do you identify as a men's rights activist? Because men's rights activist is not a label. We are not the mirror of feminism. We believe that if you care about men's issues like circumcision, like father's rights, like reproductive rights, yes, men also have reproductive issues, issues like male suicide, homelessness, all these other things, then you don't have to call yourself anything. You could just say, I want to talk about this problem. Right. And we won't say that you're an MRA. You don't have to say it. We think that the term is a verb. It's not something that you say I am, because it doesn't get you any virtue points to do that. Nobody, MRAs are demonized everywhere.
Yes.
But if you just act in the world as though these matter, and they're not incompatible with women's issues at all, then
they actually they're both men's issues are, would be beneficial to women as women's to men. Like they should go. There should be a harmony, a complement with an E. They should be complementary to each other.
Absolutely. And so, that's I guess what I was wondering about was whether or not you were engaging in the claiming of labels, or whether or not you were just more concerned with, well, do I care about these issues? And it seems to me that you're just somebody who's like, you think about it in terms of principles, not necessarily in terms of, well, how will people see me if I say I'm not a feminist, right? Or I am a feminist,
exactly.
Or whatever.
I like to avoid labels, absolutely, for many reasons. I also like to consider myself open to changing my mind and learning, and I do just want to learn and understand the truth about these things, rather than just claiming sort of an identity. Or it's not important to me.
Yeah. So a couple of final questions, because we've been going for about an hour, and I really, first off, I just want to say that I am really enjoying this conversation. I'm really glad that you came on, and I hope that you're also having fun talking.
I am.
All right.
Very much.
Okay. So like, you had a lot of really nice things to say about incels. In terms of like the way that they think and so on. What do you think are the things that incels could work on if they wanted to make their situation better?
Well, there are a few things. I think that kind of the number one issue is in the cases where things have happened, where there has been violence, and there have been a few confirmed cases of those. And sometimes I get pushback on that when I ask about it, but it is true, whatever the situations were, that there are at least 4 or 5 of these things have happened. We don't need to, say the names or anything, but I do see it as being statistically rather insignificant number. If you look at any group across any population, whether it's professional athletes or Presbyterians, you'll find a handful of people that have done atrocious things, because that's just, it's a very tiny percentage of people anywhere, and so I don't really think that the group or that title has anything to do with it. I certainly don't think that group, that small percentage defines the group, though it's been portrayed that way. I think that all the ones that I've spoken to don't approve of that, though some of them have given me pretty interesting insights about why it was kind of more appreciated or something. But that those just, and I believe that they are, that the moderators and the creator of incels.co is trying to do this now, actually, and doing a pretty good job of it, is to kind of, because a lot of them are very, very young, and the ones that are really young and that are also, let's say, they could be inching towards more extremism or something, that the ones that are more sort of self-assured and moderate, that they kind of, if they kind of guide them away from that, I think that's important. I think that they understandably react to people, to outsiders, in a very kind of a way that will alienate them, because they felt attacked so much, and they do a lot of things like trolling. They have like very it's ironic and it's sarcastic references to glorifying some of their, Elliot Rodger and stuff like that. But they do a lot of that Nazi, whatever, they do this stuff. It's trolling. It's very 4chan.
They're kind of ironically embracing the narrative that the media puts on.
Yes, exactly. And they're doing it to kind of just shock people, and and see how much they'll bite, because people do. So they do a lot of that. It's very like 4chan, and I get it. But I think that sometimes they should do a little bit less of it, because it gives people the wrong idea. And I get why they do it, but I think, they could try to just to assume, not all of them, but some of them maybe, if they didn't assume the worst of everyone, because it took me some time to kind of build a rapport with them to where they trusted me and didn't think that I was just, going to misquote or miscontextualize them to sort of serve a horrible narrative. And I understand why they're wary, completely. But maybe to just be a little bit less, to push people away a little bit less at the beginning, just so that people do get a chance to see that there's
I see what you mean. Try to be to have a little bit more good faith in the people, and patience with people who are curious. And exactly. and I get it, because they do that. We're really talking about, these men are near the bottom of the barrel of society. Like they're not. This isn't punching up when the media goes after them.
God, no. Right? And one of them, actually, sorry to cut you off. I just want to make sure I put this in there. There was one that I spoke to who also, he had a brief, just his audio on the BBC documentary, but pretty early on, he was another one that I spoke to rather early on, who I asked him, why do you think people do this? Why do you think people are so hateful like this? Why? And he said, well, I think that that they are just bullying, they're targeting the people at the bottom, just like they did when they were kids. And they bullied us when they were kids, and now they can do it, they can keep doing it, and also not look back at what they did when they were children to cause this. So they can sort of allow themselves to feel good and still continue with the same behavior. And when he first told me that, I was like, it's an interesting point of view, but I don't know if it's right. But maybe, the more that I sort of experience this, there might be a fair amount of truth to it.
It could be that. I was also thinking that while I know that incels are, look, a man who is not successful with women is a man that is unpopular with both men and women.
Exactly.
So if a woman is unsuccessful with men, we actually have sympathy for her. We think, this is why, when you see romance stories of a girl who's a crush on a guy, but she doesn't have the guts to tell him, we're hoping that she finds the courage, or she gets lucky and he notices her. Right?
Yes.
With a man with the same stories that revolve around men, we're hoping that the man finally like gets the courage up to approach her. So it's not it's based on his assertiveness, and so if he doesn't have it, we don't respect that. So men that are unsuccessful in relationships are frowned on, and especially by women. So we're looking at guys that are really low on the totem pole. And I think that I know that because I have sympathy for that, because I've known men like that, you know, and and
me too,
and I know that they're not bad men, and I know that they just, you know, they either just have bad luck with women, or they have some personal stuff they have to work on. And I also recognize that in the incel community, and I predicted this before I even spoke to them, this problem isn't just, it's clearly not just sexual. It's actually a question of intimacy. But and the other thing is that it's not just about women. It's actually so you know,
a lot of them have very, very few friends at IRL. You know, that was one thing that I asked to very early on, was like, you know, do you consider yourself having lots of close friends in real life, and can you talk about this with anyone? And most of them don't.
Yeah, so it's about just connecting with other people. That's where the problem is. And that actually it's like Jordan Peterson says, you know, like if you're at the bottom, it's actually harder to climb out. The further you go, the more difficult it is to rise back up. So a man who doesn't even have a healthy relationship with himself won't be able to build healthy relationships with other men, and so therefore won't be able to build healthy relationships with women, which also means that they will have a harder time building romances with women. All of this is connected. And I know that, but I think that the people who attack incels, which are mostly people that are in the kind of elites that have the largest platforms, they see incels as privileged because they're men. So they actually think that they are punching up. Because what is the problem? Do
you think that they really believe that, though? I mean, I know that they're telling themselves that, but I think that some of them know.
I think it's a bit of that, plus what you're saying, this Mean Girls kind of thing, where they treat these men that they feel are beneath them like dirt, because they're, you know, they don't see them as their equals, but they also see them as because the narrative is that incels feel entitled to women's bodies. It's not
which they don't even, like, that's not even a real. I mean, I never came across that at all in my research, anyone seriously believing that they are entitled to it. Yeah, but you're right. They do say that. I forgot about that.
Yeah, and that they say that you know, this is why they hate women. Obviously, it's the opposite. Incels' problem is that they love women almost too much, and it's sort of
I sort of idolize them or put them on a pedestal.
Yes, they idolize them, exactly. So that's actually you know, it's interesting because I think that that's the truth about it, but I think that the lack of empathy and sympathy and compassion for men is so high that they can't see that. And these men, it's like, you know, it's like kicking a homeless man. It's like they're at the bottom. This isn't really some rich CEO or the president or something. No, that, you know,
No, it's people that are just disenfranchised pretty much across the board. You don't find men with a lot of privilege in any domain, either socially or financially, or, you know, even with education or with work. Like, they're not powerful people, and so for them to be the oppressor is really rich. That's crazy.
yeah, for sure. But I think that they believe it. I think that patriarchy theory tells them that this has to be true. So how are your like relationships in your life, if you don't mind? Is that too personal a question?
No, that's fine. I mean, my relationships are great. I'm in a relationship now. I've been for a very long time, and I've never had these kinds of issues with, you know, even living in Hollywood, where I felt like I was even supposed to believe that I was being sort of predated upon by men and stuff. And sure, there are sleazebags in Hollywood. I mean, it's Hollywood. There just are, you know, of all kinds. People are just narcissistic and just full of themselves. But I've never had a contentious relationship with men. I don't feel I've ever been like really sexually harassed or anything, even in Hollywood when I was 20 years old. I just didn't really have that experience. I have a brother who's 10 months older than me. That might have something to do with it. I think that having women that have brothers tend to see that, you know, the men's fragility, so to speak, because you men do have it in a certain way. Men are very strong, but there's something also, especially when it comes to women, you know, that there's something that can be dealt with in a more playful way. Like, I think that women that are mothers or that have brothers or that are married or, you know, tend to kind of understand that about men. And I've never really felt, and I have, you know, I don't know if you were talking about other kinds of relationships, like
No,
okay.
I was thinking, I guess in general, but also romantically. Like, if you know, have like healthy relationships, do you see your partner is, you know, as a partner, or did you, even before this all happened, did you have like, were your relationships more antagonistic? I don't know. Like, that's another question, I guess.
I would say that some of my relationships were chaotic more early on because I was chaotic and because,
Dramatic.
you know, yeah, dramatic. I don't know that it, well, okay, if we get really personal, I did used to have more chaotic relationships in general. I have family history of, you know, alcoholism and addiction and things like that. And so growing up, my parents.
Did you have your father in your life?
My father, very, very much so.
Okay.
But he did leave my mother, you know, when I was a kid. But he was a great role model and stuff. So with me, he was great and very sort of, you know, masculine, very hardworking, tough military guy, you know, like career military. But his relationship with my mother was difficult, but there were other reasons for that. But they did, that did end up sort of blowing up in my teens, and that was tough. And I think that led me to have, to get very personal too. My mother was actually suicide, and so that was quite difficult for me. I think a lot of my issues sort of came from that dynamic, you know, where I had trouble with very close relationships. I mean, I had them, but I did have sort of a wall up, and that took a lot of sort of work and a lot of self-realization to kind of get through. But that was across the board. That wasn't just in my romantic relationships.
Yeah. Okay. And so, but things today are much different then,
yes.
right? Yeah. Okay. Well, that's great. And so like, what do you think now that you've done this? And we should probably wrap this up. I've gone a little over.
Yeah.
I don't care.
Okay.
Now that you've done this, this video, first off, when is it going to be released?
The first episode will be coming out on, I think, either a week from Sunday. Is that it might be either the last week of July or the first week of August on Sunday.
So the last week of the last Sunday of July is actually this coming Sunday.
Okay, so it's not. It's the following.
It's the
following
4th,
Sunday.
the 4th of August then.
Yes.
Okay. And so there's going to be a series. How many episodes do you know?
So far, I have a series of 8 episodes. I'm doing it very kind of. I'm not just. I wish sometimes that I were just playing my interviews, but I'm putting it together like a film almost. So there's a lot of kind of cutting, shaping things together to kind of make it feel more like a film that way. I think I mentioned this to you. You know, I know that this is kind of like controversial and difficult for some people, this topic. So I want to make it have a narrative. Like I want to make it just an interesting story, especially at first, where the audience can just get to know these people and the characters, and kind of get hooked into the story that way. So maybe that will allow them to kind of reserve judgment and learn whatever they learn.
Yeah.
So, it's pretty involved that way, but it will be like 50-minute episodes, and I've got about 8 right now, but we'll see where it goes from there.
All right. And these are podcasts, so they're audio only?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I mean, I'm personally, I'm really interested to see where it goes. And I'm still really, I'm fascinated by the idea that you found this and you took an interest in this. And also, when you and I talked a little bit on Twitter, you name dropped Jordan B. Peterson, and
I did.
And so like, why? I guess why did that interest you? Of all the, because you said that you'd be in good company, and I guess you saw some of the other guests I've had on, but why did that one stand out for you?
Oh, I just think he's like. I mean,
okay.
Yes,
All
one
right.
of the most brilliant and moving people that.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it'd be great if we could get him back on sometime, but he's
very
just
busy.
so busy these days. But
yeah,
we actually have, and I just thought I would let you know, and I'm going to remind the audience. In August, on the weekend of the 16th, 17th, and 18th, which is a Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, we're going to be having our 5th annual International Conference on Men's Issues 2019, and it's going to be a large event. We're going to have psychologists and lawyers and academics, former academics, lots of other bloggers and journalists and YouTube personalities and so on are going to be there. And, it might be really short notice for you, but I think that maybe you and I should keep talking in case you want to check one of these things out in the future.
I would love to.
Yeah. So one of the people, have you seen, there was a commercial, we talked about the funny feminist commercials, like the the Gillette ad and the and this Lee's jeans thing. Someone named who runs a company called eGuard Watches made a counter ad. Have you seen this one?
No.
Where he says it's called The Response to the Gillette Ad, and he actually talks a lot about men's issues in it. I'll send you the video of his commercial. And he's also a Hollywood actor and director, and he lives in California. And with you and Cassie Jaye and this gentleman, his name is Elon Srolovitz, coming out, especially from a place like Hollywood, and you're actually taking an interest in these things, and you're putting yourself at risk too. This is like potentially, it can have, some people might say it's career suicide, but I actually don't think it is. I think that there is a lot of people that are really interested in these topics, and I hope that more and more people like yourself, even if, just taking an interest in going down this road and approaching, these topics that are very difficult to talk about because people just don't want to open their minds to it. They just want to say, the media said that they're bad and that they kill people, and I don't want to know anything else, right? And that the fact that you would say, well, let's find out what's really going on, what's under the hood here. I think that that's definitely something that is worth doing, even if it is risky. And I know that you're probably feeling the sting of that now.
Yeah, I am. I didn't expect it to be quite this controversial, I guess, going in. But
yeah, but I'm really glad that you're doing it, and I hope that you stick to your guns and see this through, because I think it's worth it. And I think you'll find that you might. I don't know if you're going to lose friends. It could happen. I know people who have, but I think that, it's one of those things that, like, if you care about the truth, you're not going to be able to turn away.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I'm kind of in too deep too. I've had some misgivings very recently, but just because of the way people react. But it is what it is, and I'll keep doing it.
All right. Well, I guess we'll wrap it up there. Is there anything that you wanted to say or ask me that maybe you wanted to know, or?
Well, there are probably plenty of things, but seeing as we went over, I'll save them for another chat, or just ask you later.
Yeah, sure. Maybe I'll have you on again after your first episode is out.
Sounds good.
All right. Well, I want to go ahead and I guess I'll read out these super chats so people had some questions or statements they wanted to make. And these were sent to us through YouTube. I want to thank you guys for your donations. I'm only going to read the ones that are $5 or more. Otherwise, it's going to take too long. Zeranx gives us $10 and says, I don't think that it's the case that the left became the identity politics wing. I think they've generally been that way. Consider the fact that the identitarians tend to vote Democrat. Is that new? Okay, thank you, Zeranx. I agree. I think it's true. I just think, and like, I did it myself. I used to be, you know, a pretty... I bought into it, and I did the same thing. So, Fear the Reaper gives us $5 and says, body positive attitudes among average women seem to generally come from insecurity, which is another layer of unhealthiness involved in it. Yeah, there's definitely other insecurities at work there, and it doesn't make people stronger. And this is what I would like. I'd like women to be stronger. I think that they can be. And I think that this kind of stuff actually, it stunts that. If anything.
Right. And I mean, you know, not to cut into the time here too much,
it's okay.
But like, there's nothing wrong with, you don't have to be someone whose body is it's not saying that every woman should be perfectly in shape. It's just that like, there are other dimensions to you besides your appearance. So, you know, it doesn't need to be, we don't need to be, if you're not really obsessed, or if you're not really, if your appearance is not one of your main concerns, then why do you need to kind of champion it or speak? Yeah,
absolutely. Zeranx gives us $5 and says social justice has to operate on a foundation of bigotry and or othering to work. Why would justice need a modifier anyway? Well, yeah, because it's people looking to fight enemies, and they have a romantic view of the world where there's good and evil, and they are the side of good. Lauren literally gives us $4.99. Thank you, Lauren. And says, it's important to note that hating women is not necessarily inherent to being an incel. Absolutely not. I don't think we ever said that. Actually, I think that it's like we were just saying, it's because they love women. And that's what it is. And they just, you know, they want intimacy. They crave it. And when I say that, I'm not saying sex. And I'm not saying from women. I think that men can be intimate with each other in a uniquely masculine way, not in the feminist way where it's like, you know, guys should do kind of homoerotic things with each other. No, I don't mean that. Unless that's what you're comfortable with. But
right.
I think that there's different kinds of intimacy, you know. So, all right. So those are all the super chats. I want to thank you, Naama, for coming on today's show and talking to me about your podcast. I really look forward to seeing what you come out with in the future, and I hope that we can keep talking. Right?
I would love that. And thank you for having me, Brian. It's been great.
All right, and I want to thank you guys for joining us on this episode of the Fireside Chat. If you guys could please give us a like, subscribe to the channel if you're not already, and hit the bell for notifications, and leave us a comment. Let us know what you think about this. Also, check out the links to all of her social media. I have the Twitter on Naama Kates, which is her personal one, Incel Project, and Crawl Space Pod, all on the Twitter. And there's also, I have links to the podcasts, so you can like check those out and let us know what you think about them. And yeah, that's about it. So with that said, I want to thank you guys for coming on the Fireside Chat. Have a great day, and we'll talk to you guys later.